Okay, good evening and welcome to the Fergan. My name's Dan, and this evening I'm joined by my friend Rob Miller. And some of you may have heard our previous conversation we had last year. I can't remember when it was. I think it was about April or something. But Rob and I have a tendency to go into quite esoteric areas whilst tying it into the current affairs of our time. And Rob is someone who I would consider a kindred spirit. I think he and I have quite a similar way of viewing the world and similar concerns and similar passions, really, with regards to uncovering or, de-occulting the occult, so to speak. So, those of you who don't know Rob, he was the front man of the legendary punk metal band Amebix, and is currently the front man of the metal band Tau Cross. So, Rob, how are you doing this evening?
Very well, Dan. Thanks for having me back on as well. Very, very good to be here, and glad we're still talking.
What, as opposed to being in camps or something?
yeah, scribbling on pieces of paper and passing it under the doors. That'll be it. Yeah, a tap on the wall.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because the way that some people talk, it's as if we are under this kind of this cosh of totalitarianism. Yet we can still speak very freely on platforms like this. So it's this weird juxtaposition between kind of all out. Well, I'm not going to say free speech because obviously it is limited to certain platforms, but ultimately there are places where we can speak our minds still, despite the kind of looming threat of this kind of potential social credit system and these mandates which are being brought in various countries.
Yeah, the thing is, I guess we've all had it relatively easy here in the civilized West. Our generation hasn't really known any hardship at all. So we're coming up against something like this at such a low level. We do tend to respond in a fairly alarming way. But part of that, I guess, is the availability of information and also the ability to be able to extrapolate from one idea and go down all these different rabbit holes, which, personally, as you'll be aware, I'm very much guilty of that kind of behavior. But on the counterbalance to that is trying to decide what is happening and what's not happening, what's real and what's not, and getting a general assessment of how the field looks just now. And that was really, I think it spurred us to go into this conversation after a telephone conversation we had maybe about 3-4 weeks ago, something like that, a bit of a sort of Christmas catch up.
I think it was. I think it was less than that, but it does feel like it at this time of year, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's all darkness up here. But this idea that we were trying to come to some kind of settlement about this idea about consent and how that seems to be such a pivotal point in what appears to be happening at the moment, and also what is not necessarily happening. I think we were kind of going into this idea about the projection of fear onto the immediate future, particularly in places like Austria and Germany, and to a degree, I guess, in Australia too, because it's unresolved down there as it stands. But I think you agree with this as well. I think a lot of this that's going on, the projection of fear, is a bluff because there are certain rules to the game, and that was something we brought up.
Yeah, I think, and this is something I spoke to a guy called Mark Malone about last year as well, because this is a subject which interests me a lot. This idea of consent, and would our oppressors be content with our kind of acquiescence to all of this? If we'd been given no other option, you know what I mean? If do they require our kind of tacit consent in some form? Is that part of the game as far as they're concerned? Do they only consider what they're doing a victory if we have chosen to comply with it?
It appears so. I think it is. I think if we look on the broader landscape, and the ideas about, for instance, legalese, legal terminology and contractual law, and all the twisting of words and sentences within law to imply something which it doesn't necessarily mean. So we've got these things like mandatory being bandied around all over the place, which people immediately freaked out and they said, well, mandatory means it's a law, you've got to do it. And of course, people start responding and say, well, no, technically that's not the case at all, because under the law at the moment as it's disposed, it does require consent from both parties, and you need to be actually in a contractual agreement between you. For either party to have any say in the outcome. And these things, I'm led to believe, I think they're held very dear to people who have a not just a psychological insight into stuff, but what I hate to use the word, but what we might term a spiritual insight. And I guess that's drawn me into the nub of some things that I started to look into just after we'd finished talking, and it vindicated some of the things that we were saying at the time.
Yeah. Please go into that. You there's something related to the World Economic Forum which you mentioned, which I've not had a chance to look into myself. So perhaps you could introduce us to it. Yeah.
A big sort of red light went flashing, and when I was watching a video recently where somebody casually referred to one of the sponsors or one of the main contributors to the World Economic Forum as being the Lucis Trust, and they said the name Alice Bailey, and my ears pricked up straight away. It's like, oh, Alice Bailey, that Alice Bailey? Can't be. And of course it is. So in order to understand what these people who have a sort of a very respectable front in the world in general, the World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Fund, and the UN, all these people are tied in at the hip by these particular ideas. The UN and the WEF, for instance, both share the outlook of the Lucis Trust itself. It's like they're a silent partner in the background, but as most people know, there's this cube in the UN building, which is their meditation room, and most people just say, oh, well, that's a bit odd. Well, okay, maybe it's odd, maybe it's not, but it all comes down to where this stuff comes from. And for me, it was kind of a bit of a shock, but also a bit of a wake-up call, because I'll give you a bit of background. Alice Bailey, she was a student of Madame Helena Blavatsky, who you've probably heard of, who was the mother of Theosophy, the founder of the Theosophical movement, and really can be credited with everything that we now call the New Age movement. And at the foundation of a lot of these institutions appears to have been this theosophical element. Let me see. So Helena Blavatsky, she herself was introduced to the West under something called the Dostoevsky Project, which itself was funneled through the Frankfurt School, which we know as being the people who basically aligned themselves with the destruction of Western society as we know it, and the long march through the institutions and being able to infiltrate every sector of society. Actually, at an educational level and through the media and all that kind of stuff too. So you've got these people stuck in the heart of the World Economic Forum, which kind of makes me think, well, what are they talking about in there? And we unravel the teachings of Bailey herself, which are it's pretty odd, because it seems to be a lot of the ideas come down to information that she herself had been channeling over some 20 or 30 years in the great tradition of the Western mystic, and completely trusting this information as such and putting it across to create what we call, as I say, the New Age movement right now.
Right.
So we've got the Master DK, who's known as the Tibetan as well, is basically her channeled entity that she used to bring through a series of some 20 odd books, and created a publishing house called the Lucifer Publishing, which itself turned into the Lucis Trust, and has its talent deep inside these organizations like the World Economic Forum, and is spiritually informing it. So they do these kind of group meditations throughout the world on a Thursday and all this kind of stuff, and they do a kind of like as I say, a sort of channeling exercises and all this kind of thing to bring the attention of what has always been called the hidden masters, which is just odd. It's just to think that a kind of ostensibly professional organization like the WEF, with that sort of like outlook, and the UN themselves, are all tied into this weird channeling exercise. You know?
Yeah, I think this raises the kind of wider issue of the hidden connection between these seemingly kind of mundane global organizations and the occult. And I don't think people realize how deeply some of them, or even all of them, are connected to that side of things. And, you know, one example of this is that we can see outside lots of these buildings, and I'm not memorable. I don't have a good enough memory to give specific examples, but if you look it up, you can see outside many of these buildings, you have some quite strange sculptures. You have black cubes, you have these kind of spherical, globe-like objects, which are seemingly either on fire or have been destroyed by something, as though it were kind of marking an event in distant history, something that happened to this world. So there seems to be this hidden in plain sight presentation of the knowledge that the people behind these organizations have, and you can almost imagine them kind of laughing at the fact that they're able to put these symbols in front of their very buildings, and we don't notice it. We don't connect it to that more occult side of things.
Yeah, I mean, we've always been surrounded by the idea of Freemasonry and symbolism everywhere, really, without necessarily being able to understand what it means. But it is such a central part of all of these institutions and all of this sort of like governmental strata and the judicial setup and all that kind of stuff too. So it always has been a primary driving force at the heart of these people and their world outlook and their view. We just need to kind of try and understand what that view is itself, to be able to break down what they're trying to do, and how that affects us ourselves. Because, to be honest, when I look at some of the stuff from the Theosophists and their ilk, and even, I guess, going into the Golden Dawn and Crowley and stuff like that, you can find some articles of merit there, but generally speaking, it seems to be it bears all the marks of people that are following a path that doesn't really lead to anything concrete at all. It's a kind of like extension of their own imagination, and with that kind of idea, they go into these lengthy sort of treatises on how the world was and how the world is going to be, and all these hidden masters and all that kind of stuff, without any concrete evidence whatsoever.
Yeah, I know that this isn't something that you specifically wanted to get into, but we were going to be talking about something called the Babylonian death cult, and I didn't have much familiarity with it. I did a bit of research, and I came across the work of a man called Troy McLaughlin. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he wrote a book called the Saturnian death cult. Now, this is the closest thing that I could find really sort of tangible. I'm sure that you could probably give us a bit of an introduction to the Babylonian death cult. And the only reason that I bring this up is because in the research that I did of Troy McLaughlin's work, he's tying current events and the organizations of power to this Saturnian cult from ancient times. This idea that Saturn, which is also Kronos, the father time. This idea that with the energy of Saturn came this sudden kind of evolutionary understanding of time and measurement, and with that, from that sprung what we would now consider to be high civilization. And you have things like, and this may be a little bit tenuous, but you have people who claim that the square black hat that American graduates wear is actually a representation of the black cube, which is in turn a representation of Saturn. So you have this black cube symbolism, which extends throughout time, and perhaps it could be even be argued that the black monoliths in 2001: Space Odyssey also represent the same thing. This kind of leap in civilizational ability or technology, and is it perhaps would you agree that it's people like Alice Bailey and this Lucis Trust, that they see themselves as the kind of descendants of this Saturnian worship, this tradition, this cult, which believed that it exclusively had the kind of the reins of civilization in its hands?
Funnily enough, no.
Right, okay.
Not in this particular instance, no. But I know what you're talking about. Now the whole black cube symbology. It's absolutely everywhere, but you can see it most notably in things like the Kabbalah, which is the holy stone of Mecca, and you've also got it in these phylacteries, which are these little black boxes, which the Jewish priesthood will have on their forehead whilst they're praying. Mm-hmm. And you, as I say, you as you point out yourself, the symbolism is all over the world at the moment in front of prominent buildings, and obviously with architecture and stuff like that. The notion that geometry, measurement, secret techniques, and mysteries derived from that is, it's very likely. But it also does. I mean, that presents it presents a couple of questions, because along with that whole load of bump, the idea about being able to mathematically explain the universe down to the smallest item through the use of number, and through the use of letter, gematria and notarikon, all these things which are familiar to Hebrew language, where you can get one thing as representing another numerically, and also in literal meaning, and in a more intense kind of like spiritual meaning as well. It's like there's an understanding there, an absolutely keen fundamental understanding of how the universe appears to work, but that itself is not necessarily a completely natural way of looking at stuff. It's like it's very cold and dead in some ways.
Yeah.
I don't know. I suppose for students of the Kabbalah and stuff like that, you could say that you can generate mystical experiences, and you can sort of harmony with what they would term as a godhead or whatever through the practice and stuff like that, in the same way that you could with yoga too. But it kind of all begs the question of, why are people so keen to shrug off the basic experience of being a human being within flesh and blood, and exchange that for higher knowledge and all the sort of like temptations that come with that, the power and the privilege and all the things that bundle along with this stuff.
Yeah, the subversion of nature, this kind of drive that certain an extreme minority in this world have to subvert the natural order, and that's we're very much seeing kind of an advance, or an attempted advance in that at the same time, at this current time, aren't we? And for those of you who've perhaps tuned in for a slightly less esoteric conversation, I think Rob and I, the reason that we're interested in that is because we believe that it informs and assists us in understanding what's happening today. Very much so with what's going on now with the whole COVID agenda, which to me is the most kind of flagrant display of subverting nature that we've seen in my lifetime, and probably in many lifetimes. Is there anything more you wanted to say on the Lucis Trust and how it connects to what's going on today?
Well, I guess what you were saying just then as well is, I think it's important for us to have an understanding of basically the physical and the psychological logical and the esoteric elements of all of these things as they're happening in the world at any given time, if you can, because one thing will lead to another. And I wanted to get an overview of what these people believe themselves, and it all ties in with the push at the moment toward nanotechnology and toward transhumanism, and the gateway to that obviously being the familiarity with the transgender ideology and the non-binary, the push for all of this kind of thing, and the blurring of distinctions and lines between people and who they are as human beings. And they're kind of promoting this desire for people to merge with the machine themselves and give up their idea about their human identity. And for me, that's like, it's a massive trap. And in a sense, it's the end game for us as a species of different races, but a species as a whole. You know, we're being invited into a spider's web, which we will potentially never get out of. And I was looking at a program the other day where they were discussing pretty much these things about nanotech and the it's like the electric universe stuff. There's a particular phrase that they use for that, which is being able to sort of like hook everybody up together eventually, so that you turn from a human being into something which is more like just raw data. So the temptation that they're giving to people now is you don't actually have to exist as a physical being. You can absolve yourself of all the difficulties involved with this physical body, and you can become raw data, or at a preliminary stage, you can start to live within this fantasy universe of the metaverse, as they're putting it, and the gradual introduction of things like wearables, eventually leading obviously to implantables, and then pretty much job over, you know?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to the Internet of Bodies, or the Internet of Things. This grid of connecting devices with beings, and obviously that manifests itself as this new concept of the metaverse. Which, if anyone's ever seen the film, there was a Steven Spielberg film a few years ago called Ready Player One, which perfectly depicts this metaverse world that they want, where the real world is this kind of hellish dystopia of shanty towns, and everyone just clamours to get their VR headset on so that they can go and live in this more perfect virtual environment, this virtual world. And it's uncanny the kind of similarities to what we're seeing the beginnings of today, moving towards that. And can I just ask you, Rob? I put out a poll on my Telegram channel a few weeks ago, asking whether people thought that what's going on now, is it just another iteration of communism, and just another attempt at sort of authoritarian control, which will inevitably be overthrown, may last a couple of decades or whatever, or is this the end game that we're kind of seeing emerge now?
My concern at this time is really looking into this from that, I guess, what you would call a sort of the more sort of Gnostic perspective of somebody who is aware in principle of the presence within our universe of entities which are singularly opposed to the human species, and in a sense in a very real sense, that they would like to share the experience of being human, but can't do so because they're not constructed in that way at all. They don't have the same. They don't have a soul. They don't have the same kind of things that we have, and no real way of being able to experience the human experience here on the earth. So
is it like
it seems like?
Sorry, go on, Bob.
Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, it's like so are you alluding to the difference between jealousy and envy? So when you're envious of something, you don't want the other person to have it either. So these entities, because they can't attain this human experience, this spiritual experience that we can. Therefore, they don't want us to have it either. So they're dragging us down to their level.
It's either that, or they're creating a matrix to push us into, which is a halfway house, where they are able to meet the human experience distilled into this nanotechnology, into this kind of like prison of the digital. If that's a fact, then you'd have this. You'd have like a two-way traffic. You'd have a way of being manipulated by these entities, rather than the old-fashioned way, which is basically through demonic possession and all that kind of stuff that we're used to. And they would have a way into this world, which previously they've never really had.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know if we mentioned it in the last chat we had last year. I think we may have done, but we did talk a little bit about John Lamb Lash, and my only correspondence with John was many years ago. I heard him speak in an interview about how these archontic entities are drawn towards formaldehyde, and it was a very kind of a throwaway remark, which he didn't elaborate on at all, and he wasn't kind of asked to elaborate on, but I sent him an email asking if that perhaps explained the presence of formaldehyde as what would you call it, like a suspending agent in vaccines.
Right, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which I believe is still commonplace. I know it was at one point in time where vaccines, the kind of the base substance of vaccines was formaldehyde, or it certainly was an ingredient. And John wrote back saying, I think he very simply said yes, he agreed, or something like that. But many people are wondering right now, why are they so intent on injecting the entire global population? They've got this feverish obsession with getting every last person injected. And I don't mean to kind of derail what we're talking about here and take it on a tangent.
No, it's all in the same direction, I think, really.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, that's primary concern to all of us, is why can't they just leave us alone? People that have made their decision, and coming back to this idea about consent as well, I think they have to be able to push this in as many ways as possible until the person says, okay, I'll do it. And once you've said, okay, I'll do it, then that's your ticket. That's you have given your consent to whatever happens after that. You've said, I will allow something into my body which I don't know anything about, and which doesn't have any reliable long-term test data or anything like that associated with it. So what is the point of this? Why do they need everybody to be done? Well, there's streams of speculation about that. Is it the depopulation? Perhaps they do actually believe that this is designed to be doing something for the benefit of humanity. I kind of put that way at the bottom of the list. Yeah. I don't really know. It may well be, you may know whether this is information or disinformation at the moment, but I have heard about graphene oxide being found in various different samples of these so-called vaccines by a team in Portugal, and people have been basically taking from that and running as far as they can down the rabbit hole. So I kind of need to back off a little way from that, but you can almost indulge yourself and say, okay, well, what can you do with graphene oxide? If that's true, if you could get enough into somebody's system, would it create blood clots, for instance? Would it create the problems that we're seeing at the moment? And it appears it probably would. But on the other side of that, also, it could all conceivably be used as a sort of neural network if you had enough of that in there. But how much would you need to pump into a person to create this very, very tenuous sort of neural network within the existing system within the body?
Yeah, that's something I've been willing to speculate about just out of kind of curiosity. Sometimes we get criticized for speculating about this stuff because people think it reflects badly on the the movement as a whole, so to speak, the cause as a whole. But I see no reason why we shouldn't entertain, because as a friend of mine said to me once, anything that your enemy can do to you to weaken you, it will do eventually. So what we should be asking is, do they have the means to do this? Because if they have the means to do it, then I think the question answers itself. They're not. If they have the means to do something which harms us or weakens us in some way, then they will use it. On the other hand, I do.
I mean, what first?
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, what first kind of what first disturbed me about the way that things were rolled out is the insistence by governments worldwide on treating the elderly and the vulnerable, all that kind of stuff, and then going down through the ranks into the normal citizens. Also, so it's absolutely merciless. They had to trot this stuff out. So the other part of that explanation, if we're not going to go into these fields of what it could be chemically and all the rest of it, maybe it is completely completely fine as a compound. What the fucking beg your pardon, what the hell they've got inside this stuff. But
swear away, Rob.
No, I try not to I try not to if I can, but it could well be just down to profit, and it could be that as simple as that you've got shareholders and you've got investors that have been given the nod and the wink a long time before anybody else was, and they said, put your money on the vaccines, where you see people like Pfizer making 32 billion in the last year. I think it is 32 billion in profits. It's not a bad game to play if you're just interested in money. But we also see the possibility of the complete decline of the monetary system really on the horizon now, because it's obvious since 2008 that everything was gutted, and there's nothing real going on there too. There's just there's the printing out of physical money, and there's the printing out of figures on a balance sheet. There's no real financial world left anymore, I don't think. What about you?
Well, yeah, people often kind of dismiss, when people say, oh, this is all just about money, and people say, oh, that's too mundane. But what they fail to realize is that money is currency. Currency is current. We're talking about energy here. That's what the money represents, energy. These people, these vaccine companies who've made vast sums of money, they're then able to transform that fiat currency into actual tangible assets, and I believe that that's what they're doing. This is being funneled through to the likes of BlackRock, who are buying up vast tracts of land all over the Western world and beyond. Yeah. What we're talking about there is not just, they're just greedy money grubbers. What it really boils down to is a takeover of the world, quite literally and physically.
Yeah, I'm completely with you on that. You can see that physically happening. I mean, there is actual evidence for that. To say that the stuff we were speculating about before there, it's not necessarily anything you can tie together physically, but right now you can see people like the old ubiquitous Bill and Melinda Gates buying up vast tracts of farmland in the States and really becoming the people that will be supplying our food in whatever they perceive our future to be. It's a free for all right now. It's like a pirate ship commanded by all these various entities and these NGOs and organizations throughout the world. They've all jumped on the same ship, and they're going around plundering everything that they possibly can that's left. And they, as you say, they're creating that into hard physical assets, so they can say, physically speaking, they own the majority of this world, whether it's territorially or in individual commercial prospects or however they like to put it across. But I think that's in preparation for pulling the plug. It's like spend your money whilst money's worth something. Because at the end of that time, you're just going to have the guys on the chessboard that have got all the stuff, and you're going to have everybody else who's impoverished, and then they're going to offer that big debt forgiveness, which is this idea about jubilee, which comes from Judaism, which is the terms under which debt forgiveness can come about, and people can. the one time in the year, or one time in every 10 years, where a person can be forgiven all the debts that they've accrued. But of course, there's a caveat on that, and the caveat is much the same as we've had to put up with this whole vaccine thing as well. There's something that comes along with it. You have a consent, and there's something that you give up. With the vaccine, you give up your bodily your autonomy to your body, and with this with the universal basic income, which they're going to propose at some point, you'll be giving up your property, your rights to property, because that's the only way you'll be saved from the imminent financial collapse that lies in front of you.
Yeah.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, I absolutely do agree. And by the time that new system comes in, all of the real wealth would have already been funneled to these very few hands who will have converted that into real assets. And something I've spoken about wherever I get a chance is that the important thing to remember about a digital UBI, people can say, oh, well, our money is already digital, but what it isn't is programmable. And that's what the UBI will be, because it will be blockchain technology. You will be forbidden automatically. No, your bank won't have to turn off your credit card or something like that. Smart contracts built onto the blockchain will actually prevent you from, for example, spending your universal basic income more than 10 miles away from your home, or from buying fuel more than once a week, or from transacting with a certain individual or a company that is deemed to be serving some kind of unsustainable product. Absolutely, there is this crash coming, and they are in a rush to gather up all of the real assets of this world before they offer this debt forgiveness program.
Yeah. I think we're on the same wavelength there as well. So say it's funny because we can come from a very sort of like a very far out concepts, and still you can get back to what's happening now at the moment, and how that could blossom out into this very sort of like weird dystopian nightmare, where there's other ideas involved altogether. But I think there is this thing about the imminent financial collapse and all of the things that come out of that. So it's an odd time to be alive, because it's very difficult to work out exactly what's happening, because it seems like there's so many things happening at one time, and I'm not sure whether there's one body that oversees all of this, like some arch Bond villain, or whether it's a group of different people with different outlooks that agree to disagree in some ways, but have a similar sort of like understanding of what is happening at that kind of level, that we don't have all the insights, although we have an inkling.
Well, I think the concept of the Babylonian death cult is possibly as good an explanation for that ultimate kind of power as anything, because if you have a group of people who wholeheartedly believe that they are the heirs of this ancient cult, which they believe was privy to knowledge which went beyond the natural order. They believe that they were given the means to ascend beyond the natural order. Then it would follow that everything that's happening today would follow, because they believe that they had this kind of moment of acceleration where they became superior to the rest of humanity, and that they are the latest in this line of cultists, and they maintain this belief that they know what's best for the rest of the world. And this is something I've said as well. We have to consider that many, if not all of them, do actually believe that they know what's best for us, and that we're not capable of managing this natural world in the way that it should be managed, and that with their kind of superior knowledge. I mean, that's just one thing to consider, because I would also very readily consider that they are extremely psychopathic and anti-human, to put it bluntly. But yeah, I don't know if you've got any more to say on that. This kind of thread of tyranny, which seems to kind of extend back through to distant history.
Well, there's there's often these things are veiled by the idea of philanthropy, and we see that all over the place. So we see the arch villains themselves always referred to as philanthropists, and setting up charities here, there, and all the rest of it. When you know damn well that they're either poisoning people or making them infertile, or they're up to something, but whatever it is, they're making lots of money. But that can also come back to this idea about tikkun olam, which is the Jewish concept of healing the world, because the world is, or the nations themselves, are made up of inferior beings, really, intellectually and psychologically, and all the rest of it, who need to be shown the way, and they need to be shown what's right, and they need to be able to be shown what good behavior is. Unfortunately, the diktats of that good behavior have been given to that group by what appears to be, going back into that Babylonian death cult stuff, is basically off-world psychopathic entities that don't have our interest, or necessarily their interest, or anybody else's interest in mind. They just want to destroy life, or destroy the experience of life. They are absolutely consumed with rage and hatred for the human being and our ability to have this fully functioning, wonderful physical body, despite the fact that we experience pain, and we experience all the emotions you can possibly go through in your life. All of that is to do with this unique human experience itself, and it's something which isn't available to anybody else in this corner of the universe. So we've been almost trained to despise the human experience now. And if you and I can both look around scenes, if you like, that we've been part of, and you get a lot of people that are they enjoy referring to themselves as mythanthropic, as though that's a great thing, as though it's really good to hate mankind, when in a sense you're always missing the point of it. If you're just looking at your neighbor and saying he's an idiot, he can't put two and two together, he's acting completely instinctually without any knowledge of how things go at all. If you operate like that, then you're going to miss out on the whole point, which is there are just a very, very small amount, a very, very small group of people who actually are the problem, whereas the vast majority of us, like 99.999% of this world, is basically decent human beings who, given the opportunity, would get along where we could get along, and we would live our lives to the best of our ability without really having to infringe on other people. With the caveat there is that respect to your own space, your own little bit of land that you put your feet on, and that you can maintain. But I don't know whether you follow me there at all. But it's this idea about we've almost been trained now to hate ourselves, and perhaps we should actually be turning that whole thing around and starting to revere nature and the miracle that it is, rather than this incessant drive toward transhumanism and the abyss that awaits before us, where we are no longer even human beings. We're neither this or we're neither that. All we are is just raw data. And in a sense, so I'm going to waffle on it here a little bit. There's this idea now where that the human being, because they're discovering in the electrical universe, everything within the body is tiny electrical impulses. So they're talking about harvesting human beings as an energy form now. So you can wear your what you got at the moment, the Fitbits and all this kind of nonsense, a kind of like a precursor to creating your own credit through your physical organism itself. So you become your own money in a sense too. It's kind of bizarre. But there's part of me that understands it, and this is the thing too. So I'm trying to look on the other side of that and say, well, what do they mean? What do they think is going to happen from this? And you can say that there will genuinely be people out there that have good aspirations, and they're good-hearted people that want the best. But unfortunately, when it comes to these kind of levels of control, you simply don't get that kind of stuff sustaining itself. You don't get good energy sustaining itself anymore. It becomes subsumed in the agenda. The agenda itself just looks very dark from here.
Yeah. I think what you're touching on there is this idea of, can technology actually be a boon for humanity, and that's something which I have discussed with others, and I think about quite a lot. My gut feeling is that ultimately, on balance, high technology always corrupts man. But I think what you're saying with regards to misanthropy and that, I know exactly what you're saying there, because if there ever was a time to see the best in humanity, now is it. Because if we don't look for the very best in humanity at this time, then it would be very, very easy to throw in the towel. And this is something else I talk about with a few people. I think we're fighting for the man to come as opposed to the man of today. Because if we look at humankind now, most people are in quite a degenerated state, and that's not to say that they're bad people. I agree with you. The vast majority of people are well-meaning, good people, but they have been weakened by decades of these insidious agendas and anti-cultural movements, which have really kind of made man a shell of his former self. So now is the time that needs to be turned around, and we need to look to what mankind could be. And I think those of us who have a deep interest in ancient history have an advantage there, because we know that at one point in time man was far better than he is today.
Yeah, and you can kind of see this, the cultural emptiness, the wasteland that we're living in today, the way that's been pushed across so hard that within this situation we're living in at the moment, it reflects really directly in your next door neighbor, who and their obsession with all the rules and regulations they've been given, all the stuff, mask up and social distancing and whatever, this, that, and all the rest of it. But it's as though they haven't had any kind of meaning for so long, and they've suddenly found it again. There's something that you can belong to. It's like if society itself is atomized to such a degree that it's actually sort of forbidden to be able to form any groups which are interested in sort of our cultural roots and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, if not forbidden, it's actively discouraged. But people are desperately looking for something to belong to. But unfortunately, when something like this comes along, they can easily get subsumed in that and brought into an hysterical fever pitch, as that Belgian guy's been rabbiting on about recently, about the mass formation psychosis, where what we have been seeing, and we've been getting dangerously close to that, is that the ability of an entire group of people to be changed fundamentally through the zeitgeist at the time, with this particular COVID-19 scam thing, as being that zeitgeist, has the ability to change people into monsters, really, where it concerns the normal day-to-day, who they would be as normal people without the pressure of their peers and the conformity that's just been pushed onto people for the last 2 years now.
Yeah, there's a really good content creator called The Woodlander, and I think it was his most recent video. He talks about exactly that, how we need to kind of be a little bit forgiving of the masses, because they believe that they are part of this kind of positive cultural movement. They believe that they're doing good, that they have kind of tapped into this very social drive to kind of save their society, save their communities and whatnot. And obviously they're very misinformed. They've got it completely arse about tit, but their intentions are generally good. Go on.
I still think we have the right to be angry.
Oh yeah,
I still think we have the right to be angry with these people, and I am. I'm furious with the people around me, family and friends likewise. And it's not because I don't love them or care about them. It's because everything that they've done keeps on perpetuating this cycle cycle of abuse that we're going through. And they can't seem to make that connection that each time you do this, something worse keeps on happening. Now, at the moment, we're in this kind of like lull. I guess for reference, we should say we're in January of 2022. We're in this kind of lull period of this massively abusive relationship that we've been having with government worldwide. And you know, I liken it to this idea about the beaten girlfriend, wife, who has been allowed out now. It's like, oh, go on out, love. You go and see your friends, catch up, have a drink, you know, but you better behave yourself. But you know damn well she's going to get another black eye when she comes back. Yeah. It's as though we're expecting something coming down the road now, and I'm not at peace with this right now at all. I think this is a very, very dangerous time, because it is using very primitive psychological techniques to be able to reinforce the damage that's already been done. So if they come back harder now with something new, you know, it might be, I don't know, it might be, what they're saying is like, not polio, you know, it could be some kind of illness, it could be a cyber attack on the banks or whatever comes next, and there will be something coming next. Whatever comes next is a false flag. We know damn well that that's what it is. It's just we could have done with so many more people being aware by this point, because once you reach that critical mass of people that are awake and aware, then you've got that Overton window. You know, you've owned this space, and you can say, all right, we know that something is going on here. We don't know exactly what it is. We don't know exactly where it goes. You know, this is the point of having discussions like this. We don't know. We simply don't know. We're just saying, we're speculating, and perhaps nobody really knows, apart from perhaps a very, very select few individuals. But sorry, I'm rabbiting on there a little bit. But this idea about, I don't know, go on.
I was going to say, yeah, I agree. At this point, ignorance is a choice, you know, with all of the tools that we've got to hand now. And this is the thing that I'm most angry about, is because I've got some people who are very close to me in my life who I tried to keep abreast of what was going on from the very beginning. And I was feeding them all of the information that I thought they needed to see through this. And they would kind of feign an interest in it. They would pretend as though they got it. And then, you know, as soon as the vaccines were available, they went out and got them, you know. And I think that's what makes me angry, more so than those who are completely ignorant of everything, is those who know that this is a scam, or at least know that there's something not right with it, yet are complying for an easy life. Those are the people that I'm most angry with, and I still love them, but
I completely agreement with you about that, because we have to look on and say, what's going to happen to these people? I don't know what you're noticing in your day-to-day life, but I would say where I live, there's a vast majority of people that have been vaccinated up to the eyeballs, you know, and they put it on the local sort of free ads here, and people are queuing up around the block and all that. Literally, it's like that here, which is really odd considering down south it's not the same. But I'm noticing within people that I know that are vaccinated, they don't look well. They're not well. They all seem to be coming up with some kind of illness here, there. You know, it's either sciatica kicking off. It's always like they got arrhythmia going on, or they got this, that, the rest of it, blood clots. They just don't look well. I don't know whether that's a projection of my own concerns, but it's almost as though there's a clear delineation coming about now, where we know damn well that we were right to make that decision, but it feels so bad because we tried. We really did try, you know. And I was familiar with the process of losing a lot of friends because of what happened to me a couple of years ago, where the whole deplatforming and all that kind of thing. So it wasn't such a big thing for me to go into those discussions with people and then, there goes another one, you know, that I won't hear from ever again. It's just been a great disappointment, because I think, as you were pointing out there, people have swapped their entire future for this idea about comfort and security now, here and now, that you're being looked after by mummy daddy government, you know. It's never been the case. It never will be the case. Why did people that grew up within the punk scene, for instance, suddenly just switch all those things off, and it became, you know, question all authority to actually don't question anything at all? It became Jello Biafra spouting off against big pharma and all the rest of it, and now he's just bleating away and saying, "Get your jabs," you know. It's just crazy. It's a crazy world, but it's to do with, I guess, they're absolutely terrified of peeling back that veil and looking there and finding the emptiness, whereas if you've had to confront that before to a degree, it's not such a big thing. You just go, well, that's life, you know?
Yeah.
We can't be in a cozy bubble. We can't be looked after all the time. We can't rely on anybody else. There's nobody out there that's looking after our interests as a whole. There's no savior coming. There's no great big plan that's going to help us all. We have to kind of do this individually and allow the impetus of that itself to spread out.
Yeah. I want to read out a few comments, because there's the first kind of one I want to read out is a little bit relevant to what you just said. We've got Maximus Decimus. I can't read the rest of that. Meridius, who says, Rob is brilliant. Amebix was a game changer for me. Respect to the Baron for having the guts to be true to himself in a truly repugnant fake industry. And I just want to take this opportunity now to let people who aren't aware know that a few years ago, Rob was essentially cancelled from the punk and metal scenes because he had the audacity to read a few books and and to mention the names of the books and authors in the thanks list for his album. This led to the label Relapse Records dropping Talcross at the time, and it's the reason I think that it's so significant is because Rob comes from a scene which was almost, kind of unanimously left-wing liberal. And I'm not saying that Rob doesn't consider himself either left-wing or liberal now. I'm not going to define Rob for him. But the point is that the people who used to be enormous fans of Rob's work begun to disown him because he essentially was too open-minded for them. And we're now seeing, as Rob said, we're now seeing the kind of an expansion of this idea now with the last couple of years, where you've got Antifa and all these kind of, question authority punks, as Rob mentioned, who are literally not questioning a single thing that is coming to them from the mainstream media or government. And they're somehow dressing up their obedience as a form of rebellion in their own eyes. I don't know how they quite reconcile it, but they do find ways somehow to do it. So yeah, I don't know if you've got anything further to add on that, Rob. I just wanted to, bring a few people up to speed if they're not familiar with what happened to you in the past.
Hail Decimus, blah blah blah. But yeah, thanks. That's my little story. And I guess what was quite good about that was it happened to me before it happened to a lot of other people. So I guess back, it was kind of almost back in the day. So it's not a big deal now. It was 2.5 years ago or something like that. And it was the best thing in a sense that could happen. Yeah. Coming to your idea about, yes, I did think of myself as, broadly speaking, left-leaning and socialist. I think in principle that's what I would have called myself, but I don't recognise anything. There's not even a scrap of what I thought and what I believed in back in there anymore. There are a small handful of people that are still thinking and still working things out, and I absolutely salute them because it's difficult. And I do get people reaching out to me and saying, "Listen, I respect what you did and all that." And I didn't do anything at all. It's just that what I didn't do was I didn't bow down, and that's all you need to do is just refuse to take the knee to anybody, because the whole motivation behind Amebix to start with was no gods, no masters. I tried to be true to that. So just be true to yourself. People don't know what I thought about an author or what my individual opinions are, but they just made it up, and that's the way it goes with the internet nowadays. But yeah, lots of letdowns, lots of disappointments. But I can't be dwelling on that now, because the quality of people that you meet once you move outside of that milieu is so much better. And the people that are interacting with one another, because we're all looking for answers to stuff, and we're not like your Antifa warriors or your SJWs. We haven't already got the answer, and we're going out and forcing it onto somebody else. We're still looking, and I think that's the healthiest way you can be. It's like I have so many different ideas that are constantly sort of spinning around inside my head, trying to find some kind of unifying theme and some meaning to all of this, and they're not yet. All they're doing is saying this connects to that, connects to that, connects to that, but that doesn't mean that you've got the be all and end all of anything at all. It means that you're still actively looking, and maybe you'll never find all the answers. You'll find a bit of something, and you go, well, that's interesting. It's like bumping into the Lucis Trust and going, well, what's Theosophy doing in the World Economic Forum? And you can say, well, actually, what that says to me is that these people that are running ostensibly the show at the moment, that are saying about the unique opportunities, that we have a unique opportunity and all this to go into creating a vision for the new world. These people believe in hidden masters in the middle, either in the Hollow Earth itself, which people thought I was crazy, in the Hollow Earth, or through Shambhala and Agartha. They believe in the hidden masters or the ascended masters. They believe in the coming Maitreya or the new Buddha or the new Christ consciousness, and their life at the moment is being dedicated toward fulfilling that, like this kind of like cult prophecy. They are a cult group that's at the very center of the management of this whole debacle that's going on just now.
Yeah, I've got a patch on my jacket which says in runes, it says "Seek the mysteries, reign till Runa," and that's always been my philosophy too. We are explorers, and to me there is almost no greater virtue than an open mind, and because an open mind is also a mind which is willing to admit when it was wrong, which I believe is the mark of a man, and. I always take any opportunity to admit if I was wrong, and opening myself up on my Telegram channel on the Fergan, and in my videos, I've had a few opportunities to admit when I've been wrong, and I don't see anything wrong with that. And I know that most people are probably here to hear Rob's story, but I just want to just add in a small anecdote of my own, which is that although I'm younger than Rob, I come from a similar kind of scene where you were expected to, musical scene that is, where you were expected to be politically a certain way. But what I found was that actually the people within that scene didn't have a thought of their own. Everything that they believed came from someone else, from this kind of this body of law which they tapped into, and they weren't any different from the mainstream. And that was a huge disappointment when I realised that. And from that time, about 15 years ago now, I started to move away from that scene. And actually, Rob and I became friends because I expressed support for Rob after he'd been cancelled. And actually, Rob, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but you inspired me to essentially cancel myself, which is quite funny in itself, because I did in February of 2020, just before coronavirus hit, I did a tour of Europe on my own as a solo performer for Wolkensman, my band, my project, and while I was sat at Hamburg, I think it was Hamburg Airport, it may have been Düsseldorf, something like that, I can't remember, somewhere in northern Germany. While I was sat at the airport, actually no, it was Leipzig, sorry. I was sat at the airport waiting for my driver, the tour manager and driver, to pick me up. And I actually sat there, and in my notebook I wrote a long statement, kind of similar to the statement that you put out, Rob. And bear in mind that this is before coronavirus kind of came and decimated the music scene. But I put out a statement expressing my worldview, essentially, on what drove me to make music. And although my project Wolkensman wasn't to be a political expression, there is a kind of sort of socio-political drive behind it, in a sense. And I went in this statement, I went into detail about my criticisms of usury and central banking, and this kind of just the kind of I would say kind of top down supposedly left-wing culture which had kind of just dominated everything, and you can probably go onto my Facebook page of Wolkensman and find it and read it, but it was quite, I'm really glad I did it, because I when coronavirus hit, I had no choice but to stand where I do on the issue, which is the same place that Rob stands on it, which is that we will not be injected. We will not perform at concerts where the audience is expected to be injected or anything like that. And I took a very public stance on this, and I'm proud to do that. And it's funny because I had already, unknowingly positioned myself before that, but before this whole thing hit. So sorry, a bit of a tangent there, but I just wanted to mention that.
No, that's great. That's good. That's a really good thing to hear. And have you found like the quality of your relationships with people that you've met subsequently have been better?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also, I think more importantly, because I'm not concerned about what people think of me. When previous friends of mine have decided to disown me or distance themselves from me quietly without even mentioning why, my attitude has just been, oh well, their loss, and I have no hatred for them. If I saw them again, I'd gladly shoot the breeze and catch up and whatever. But the way I see it, there are so many opportunities for really meaningful friendships and alliances out there that you really don't need to hold on to those worthless relationships from your past. You can, if you just dedicate your time to those who give you something of value in return. And I found that particularly liberating, because it doesn't matter how many or how few friends and allies I have. All that matters is the quality of them.
Yeah, we've been promoted this idea, particularly through social media. It's that you need to accrue as big a following as possible, and as people are harvesting likes and going out of their way to echo opinions that are popular enough for everybody to be able to agree with you. So me being me, I had a Facebook page under my name, and there were a lot of people on there at one point, but I do have this propensity to go and talk about things that I shouldn't be talking about, and it's almost like going from hundreds of people, really like that. It's great because it's a broad general statement to starting to actually get into the nitty gritty, and you're noticing less and less people reacting, and then there's about 2 or 3 people in the end going, yeah, okay, you're still there, you're still alive. So I just thought, well, there's no point in me being here at all, because people are too frightened to either say anything publicly in agreement or disagreement. They want life to go on without any risks anymore. It's like, don't pop your head up, don't say I like, don't say I dislike or anything like that when it comes to controversial opinions. It's just, you don't need people like that, really. I prefer people that you could have a good argument with or against, or you could fight with in some way, and come to some new conclusions, because I'm always doing that these days. I'm always bumping into people that shake my boat a little bit and make me rethink some things, like the idea about you don't have to be right. If you're stuck in a place where you think you've sorted it out and that your world is all resolved, and that your philosophy and your outlook is right, then you've made a great mistake somewhere. You've gone down into some weird little cul-de-sac where nothing is going to evolve for you anymore. You've got to keep on doing this stuff, and you've got to keep pissing people off, and you've got to keep asking and answering questions where you can.
Yeah, and
could I come back?
Yeah, go on. Yeah,
sorry, go on.
No,
I was just another point. There you go. Another point I made. That you made earlier on. So I'm just going to I was listening to Morgoth the other day, because it seems to be somebody that you know and that I kind of bumped into a little while ago. Funnily enough, I don't know whether he listens to you, but I was turned on to Morgoth's podcast broadcast, the YouTube channel by John Lamb-Lash, funnily enough, because they're big fans down there in Andalusia.
Yeah,
but
I'm surprised to hear that, but that's
listening
great.
to Morgoth. That's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah. It kind of goes around. You realise what a small family we are, but what a good family as well, with a lot of different views. But the fairly recent chat by Morgoth on the new Matrix movie, and he kind of I don't know whether you listened to that one at all, but he kind of came to the conclusion which I guess you were kind of hinting at there as well, which is that actually these people that we used to see as being the rebels and the outsiders, or like to see themselves as that, have become the system. That's them now. They own all of that stuff. They're the people that make the rules. They're the people that do all the censorship, and they're the people that do the cancelling. They have dominion in the new culture that's been formed, and they haven't fully realised that yet. But that's what's going to ruin it, because it doesn't go anywhere. These are non-creative people. Like I say, if they think they're already sorted out, well, they're not doing a journey anymore. If you're not able to create, if you're not able to imagine, and you're not able to continue on any sort of journey, you're stuck. You're not going to do anything. There's nothing. He points out there's nothing new being made in that kind of in the film world since the early 2000s. There's like no more stories that they can tell, because they're trapped by their own self-regulation and their own self-censorship. There's things that they can't talk about. There's realities about the human condition and how we get on and don't get on in the real world that they can't talk about. Instead, they would like to foist on us these just the anti-human ideas about how we should be escaping the ideas of gender and of cultural identity, and everything to do with how we connect to our humanity. That's all they have to offer, is deconstruction. There's none of the other side of that, which is where's your art? Where's your real science? Where are your great architects? What have you made recently? What have you done?
It seems to me that quite a lot of these kind of cultural revolutionary characters, like the Wachowski sisters, I suppose you call them now, they seem to come with some kind of caveat. And I mentioned in the Fergan Telegram channel the other day, I mentioned a book called Weird Scenes from Inside the Canyon. I forget the author's name. Unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago, but I did listen to a couple of podcasts with him at the time when he was alive. I have not actually got around to reading his book, but the book is essentially about the kind of 60s hippie and sort of rock and roll movement that was strangely centered around Laurel Canyon, which I believe is in...
Yeah, I read it.
Oh, you read it? Okay, brilliant. Yeah, so you'll probably be able to shed more light on this than I, but there's things in there like... Jim Morrison's father being a high up military personnel, and all of these bands, they've got these very strange connections to American intelligence and the CIA, and it does raise some very big questions about how these bands were formed, why they were promoted to the positions they were in. And just before I kind of let you comment on that, Rob, I just what reminds me of that is you talking about the Matrix. You've got these the directors, the creators of the Matrix, the Wachowski siblings, I'll call them, who seems to have originally made this very, very kind of illuminating Gnostic kind of work of art, which really kind of awakened lots of minds within the mainstream. But then just a few years later, they themselves transitioned genders. And I'm not necessarily saying that makes them bad or disingenuous people. I'm just saying that what they did in their personal lives does perhaps unfortunately tie into the kind of wider agenda at play. And it just seems to me that these, whether it be bands or directors or actors or whatever, who make these kind of seemingly revolutionary pieces of art, they then turn out to actually be very much a part of the system in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really true. I mean, the Laurel Canyon book is fascinating. It's like the mamas and papas and Jim Morrison, amongst others, all these people passing through Laurel Canyon, and all of them having these kind of spurious CIA military connections. And then, of course, goes on to Charlie Manson, who himself seems to have been an MK Ultra project at some time. And they are created as cultural icons to inform the generations. The whole hippie project and stuff like that seems to have been overseen by the CIA anyway. So what were they trying to do? Well, it's an extension really of that whole Frankfurt School ideology of destroying everything, destroying all the ideas about identity, sexuality, cultural heritage, everything like that. It's all part of that program to tear down the West. But the problem with these people is they don't seem to have anything else to replace it with. And particularly when you're looking at, as I say, stuff as enlightening as the Lucis Trust being the philosophical spiritual arm of the current operation, and you say, well, what is actually behind that? Where's the meat? Where's the meat and vegetables here? There doesn't seem to be any. It's all an illusion, and it's all being run through deception. So if you start to listen to a cult within these financial and UN institutions that's espousing these ideas about secret communications with the hidden masters, and you need to be specifically attuned, and you need to be the head guru to be able to do that, and to tell them what the hidden masters are telling you. This just smacks to me of that whole UFO conversation that we've had on another occasion, but that I'm kind of keen on that too. It's this whole idea about there have always been malignant entities hovering around human beings, trying to experience our life or trying to ruin our life if they can't experience it. And they've always got the entrance to us through our own consent, and we're coming right back round to that. And when we consent to allow these into our psychic space, and particularly when we say we're going to allow ourselves to be the mouthpiece for them, and spread their message amongst the foolish cattle of mankind.
Yeah. Just to mention, thank you to Mountain Pirate, who mentioned that the book we just mentioned is by David McGowan. So that's weird scenes from inside the canyon, if anyone's interested, and it's something that I definitely intend to read myself at some point. Rob, you mentioned when we were kind of setting up for this chat, you mentioned that you would be interested in perhaps talking about kind of the legal deception. Is that something you wanted to get into a little bit now, or do you think we should just keep it on this topic?
Yeah, well, I guess, there's nothing really that I know about that, but I was quite interested in the concept of deception as being a legal device. Unfortunately, I hate being so predictable, but I'm coming back to Judeo-Christianity, particularly the Judeo part of that, because within the Talmudic tradition, you've got an immense amount of law, LORE and LAW. So a lot of the arguments given there are to do with the lawfulness or the unlawfulness of a situation, and they do argue for the irrelevance of people outside of the tribal unit as having no sort of having no status in law which is worthy of recognition, all the rest of it. So there is a discussion to be had about that. Have you ever heard of the Sabbateans, Sabbatai Zevi?
Yes, I have the Sabbatean Frankists. I've not looked deeply into it. I have a very kind of beginner level understanding of what that. It's a subsect of Judaism, isn't it?
Well, kind of. Yeah. But what happened was around 1666. This fellow Sabbatai Zevi was pretty much declared himself to be the new Messiah. I think he was in Prague at the time or something like that, somewhere around Central Europe, and he accrued this massive following. But the in order to be able to facilitate the change from one age to the next, the coming revelation of God coming down to earth, what you needed to do was you needed to invert all of the moral laws that were previously held over observant Jews. So he promoted the idea about big sexual orgies, drunkenness, debauchery, sex with kids, animals, whatever, anything that could be so offensive, as he would have said, to invoke the wrath of a god who would come and destroy and then be able to rebuild again. So it's kind of like this millennialism that he set up around himself. But it just sounds like a kind of Svengali character who was enjoying the wave itself. But funnily enough, there wasn't any great contradiction in that at all for people that had already come up with these ideas that the Talmud counteracts the Torah. So the Talmud and the Talmudic priesthood, the Babylonian death cult, are the ultimate authority, and you don't have to refer to the Torah itself, which doesn't have these kind of like dispensations regarding these, well, in such a degree regarding every sort of like in and out of your daily life and how you wipe your backside or whatever. But so you have these ideas about how you can fool, and it's almost like it's a challenge to the rabbinical student to be able to trick God into believing something, and if you can get away with that, then he or whatever respects you for it. So you've got a free ticket. So you can imagine what in principle you could get away with. You could say there's a certain number or whatever that has a great deal of significance, but also it has significance in another way too, because that number alludes to the number of letters in the Torah. And if all of those letters were to be destroyed, then there would be something. There would be a deal which was met.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you know quite what I'm talking about there, but yeah.
I have read very kind of
coming back to the black cube.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry. Coming back to the black cube, it's all around that. It's about this understanding about meaning through letter, through number, through mathematics, gematria, geometry, and the extension of that, which we get all of our kind of like Masonic tradition. So Masonry itself, the Masonic tradition in the West, is really, it comes from that Judaistic root. And also, obviously, through ancient Egypt too, where the two were intertwined anyway, and that's like a Gentiles version of that kind of religion as well.
Yeah, that's a good little introduction there, which it's something I'm going to investigate further. But it interests me that you mention the year 1666, because something that I've been posting about a little bit on my Telegram channel and researching for myself is the Sexta Act of 1666, which was an act which could be interpreted to allow the British state to declare all men and women dead until proven otherwise. Now that sounds quite far-fetched, and obviously people have their own interpretations, and some people believe that the act doesn't actually declare any such thing. My point is that even if it was never intended to declare such a thing, it may be used for such a thing. And I don't want to go on a huge tangent with this. The reason I mention it is because when we're talking about consent is an enormous part of the legal system. And this is something, people say, it doesn't matter if you find a new way to use the legal system against itself. They will just ignore their own laws. Well, actually, from the research I've done, from the examples of people's successes and failures that I've heard about, actually your consent is extremely important to them. They do have a set of rules that they need to follow for you to incriminate yourself. And I won't go too deeply into this because this could be an hour-long conversation on its own. I mention it because I think it's representative of the kind of wider cosmic law that these people follow, which is that they believe if they can deceive you into doing something, then they are karmically relieved of any kind of karmic debt, because it's your fault for being deceived. It's not their fault for deceiving you.
Yeah, and that's why you have things like what's it called? Things like programs like Black Mirror, where you've got this projection of what do they call it again? Predictive programming, where you have ideas, scenarios presented to the public years before they actually happen in effect. So it's you've already been told.
Yeah. So
that we've done our job, which is our remit was to say, look. There's a film about an aeroplane going into the Twin Towers, and that's like 3 years before it happened. But we told you, or Black Mirror showing you all these episodes where there's one that actually almost mirrors Zuckerberg's presentation for Meta, the metaverse the other day. It's people creating credits to be able to work within this alternative universe. You imagine being stuck in your bathtub with a headset on all the time, living in an imaginary universe. It's just hell, isn't it?
Yeah, to people like us, it is. I can't think of anything worse, but unfortunately there will be people out there. And, for some of them, there are people out there who do already live quite a dystopian existence. If you're a young man living in an East London council estate or something like that, and you've got basically no prospects of a career, your parents are just about scraping by on benefits, gangs are warring on your street every other night, you can almost understand why someone in that position would want to escape into this metaverse. We just need to try and reach them and help them to understand that's really not what they want. It doesn't lead to anything good. But yeah, certainly for people like you and I who perhaps lead slightly more fortunate lives in more idyllic parts of the world. For us, it's imagine choosing that headset over a wander amongst the mountains and forests of where you live. I just can't imagine it.
Yeah, I know, and you're right. Actually, it's like sometimes you forget what a bloody miserable existence people can have, and it's all very well sitting here feeling sorry for myself. But when you've got a family of 6 living in a tenement block in New York, 6 months, what an absolute nightmare. I mean, where would you find any hope? Where would you find any reason to go on? I mean, it's no wonder we've got this terrible. Actual pandemic of suicides and hopelessness, and the sheer mental health mountain that's waiting to collapse onto the health system at some point in the very near future. What a mess these people have made of us.
It really is tragic. I don't know if this is going to go on, but you are breaking up a little bit, Rob, there. Hopefully that was just a momentary thing, but if it carries on, we might have to kind of call it a night. But for now, let's carry on with this. I don't know, is there anything else specific you wanted to touch on, or any kind of subjects you wanted to come back to that we've gone through tonight?
Not that I can think of, no. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, you're okay now, yeah.
All right, sorry about that. I mean, it's people probably don't realise I live in what you probably think is the middle of nowhere, and we got the world's worst internet down here. It's almost like every one of these 56k modems back in the day, really. So I mean, it's funny because I think we were a little bit awkward. I was a bit awkward starting off on this, trying to figure out what it is that we're talking about. But I think the best thing here is just being able to shotgun a lot of stuff out there and talk about things, because the strangest stuff comes up just in casual conversation. So I made a couple of notes here, and I'm just trying to see if there's anything. So I had a couple of quotes from.
Yeah, go to them by all means.
Yeah, from the Lucis Trust. Okay. So these are a couple of things that come through the Lucis Trust and kind of give you an idea about what these people believe and how they want to go about putting this stuff into effect. What's this say? Preparation too must be given to the developing of higher psychic powers. Hospitals and schools will appear under the direct guidance of the masters. Teachers will train the minds of the pupils to be responsive to direct inspiration from above. Occult meditation is a means of consciously and purposefully directing energy from a recognized source to the creation of some specific effect. So they're basically talking about the basic principles of magic. And if you can get enough people practicing meditation towards some vague idea about the hidden masters or whatever they want to call it at the time, the Christ consciousness, Maitreya Buddha, you can create some effect. You can use that as an energy source. What else have we got here?
And that ties into the mass psychosis thing that's going on the kind of opposite side of it. It's this idea that if you can, encourage a large body of people to focus on one outcome, then I mean that's essentially what magic is. You know, when people think about magic, they don't understand that it's as simple as that. Directing focus onto certain things.
Yeah, I think that's how you and I got into this conversation on the telephone initially. It's when you become really aware of this. Recently, you probably would have noticed it too. There's these sort of periods where things feel really, really dark and really threatening, and then unaccountably the next day it's like, it's all right. You just putt around, you do your normal stuff. It's as though we can physically feel the presence of this low vibratory energy that's going around at the moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get it, and it's just it almost floors me at times at the moment when you just feel this overwhelming, just like truckloads of stuff which is pushing down on top of you. And other days it's simply not there. I can't really account for it apart from what you're saying there, which is there is a communal generation of frequency that's being made by all of us as participants within this great big experiment. I think that the idea with the continued generation of the fear narrative is to keep the I hate using hippie phrases, man, but keep the vibe low, to keep us at this low density, humming, sort of like slightly threatening vibratory state, where we're subsumed in fear or at least anxiety for most of our day. So we can't do anything. We can't aspire to anything at all. We can't be creative. We can't have good conversations because we're blocked up with this bad energy. So again, group consciousness and group psychology, all of these things, it's one massive worldwide experiment in how to manipulate the entire population of the planet if they possibly could get hold of the rest of us. But they can't, and they never will. And I guess what I would say as a footnote to this, I don't think it's going to work. There's been some points during this last couple of years when I've been really concerned, really worried, and from time to time I still am fearful and anxious. Other times not so much, but I don't think any of those things necessarily matter. It's just that I can't see that this plan will work out because it's too ephemeral. It doesn't actually have anything real at the end of the day. Part of the reason for thinking that as well is looking at the characters involved. I don't know whether you've ever seen the picture of Klaus Schwab almost naked on the beach except for a wedding dress and a little top hat, and it's like a clamshell, clamshell sort of like codpiece over his tiny little shriveled genitalia.
I've not.
Have you not seen
No.
that? This it's an absolute factual. God, you'll have to post it up at some point. I'll send it to you. But it shows you how ridiculous these people are. And actually, something that occurred to me before, which I was meaning to talk to you about, was there's this curious a factor which I don't know whether I can make anything out of yet at all. But I've met a few people in my life that are involved with very fringe sexual activities, and I don't mean illegal stuff. I mean kind of like just very, very fetishistic.
Right.
And whilst I haven't got anything good or bad to say about that, it's not really my bag. But some of the people that really like to be dominated or to be in these kind of S&M relationships seem to be predisposed toward this kind of agenda and toward following it. Because I know people that are intimately involved in pushing out this kind of stuff and the propaganda that goes with it who are like that. And I've, people that I've known from my earlier youth, and it's like, oh, well, you were a bit weird back then, but that's all right, whatever, whatever floats your boat. But that's something they have in common. And I think that you look at people who have an innate desire to be dominated by another person, and you'll find somebody that's infinitely malleable to the will of the person that sees that.
Yeah, that ties into the victim-perpetrator bond, which is something that we'll both be familiar with from John Lash's work, and which I made a video about a few months ago. And I think a lot of people, a surprisingly large number of people, feel content as either the victim or the perpetrator, and some of those people extend that to a fetishistic level. Yeah, I can definitely see how that works, because I think it's quite rare to find someone who desires to be neither a victim nor a perpetrator. That takes a real kind of, dare I say, spiritual balance, and I'm not going to declare that I've succeeded in that or anything, but it's something that I do aspire to, and I think. But most people seem to want to either be the victim of something or the perpetrator of something. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, when you put it like that, I would say, broadly speaking, that's probably true. And you can also recognise that in the current sort of cultural soup that we live in, the people are encouraged to take on the role of victim over anything else just now. So you're always a victim for one reason or another, and that is supposed to empower you uniquely. But I don't think it necessarily does. I don't think it lets you recognise that you have the ability to be able to one degree or another to be able to escape from whatever it is you thought you were trapped by.
Yeah, lots of food for thought.
Maybe.
Yeah. And unless you've got anything else to add, I mean, we can definitely have another chat like this, fairly soon, because we always come up with some interesting stuff, and hopefully people have enjoyed our kind of wild, meandering discussion this evening. I mean, as I said at the beginning, Rob and I are both people, I think, who are really quite willing to freely explore any and all subject matter, and I really see nothing wrong with that. And obviously it doesn't appeal to some people. Some people want to stick to a very kind of narrow set of topics, or keep things very kind of optically relevant or whatever. But this is more for enjoyment's sake, I would say, rather than, I would imagine that almost everyone listening is... converted. We're preaching to the converted already, but I don't know. Yeah, if there's any last things you'd like to add, otherwise we'll come back to this and have another conversation in a few weeks or a couple of months or something.
Well, I'd love to come back and have another conversation. I always find it difficult to get on my feet with this kind of stuff, because my tendency to just waffle about any old nonsense and try and find some way for that to resolve itself. But sometimes it's nice. It's nice when it sort of does, and you come out of it, and I think, well, actually, that's quite interesting. There's something more there. We're hitting a vein somewhere along these discussions, these chats.
We're riffing. We're riffing in more ways than one.
Yeah, that's exactly so, Dan. Well, again, it's been a pleasure. Being on your cast, and also to anybody or any. I can't see a screen, so I don't know whether we've been joined by anybody, but if we have, thanks for tuning in, people, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk my nonsense again, Dan.
No, you honestly, I think you probably think that you've been more meandering than you have. I remember at times I felt like that as well, but you've come out with some really insightful stuff as usual. And we've had around about roughly on average 40 people watching for the whole time, which is good. And this will be posted for people to watch back as an archive. So I'm sure we'll get at least a couple of hundred more views. And people in the chat are saying that they've really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks for being with us, Rob. And speak to you soon.
Cheers, mate, and Happy New Year, everyone. Bye.
Bye.